Hello everyone and welcome to the first part of my Deepkin project. This will end up being a massive project spread over the next sort of 6 months or so I think. There's a lot of models in the range, there's a lot to paint, and there's a ton of new techniques and ideas I want to go through. So one of the first things I want to go through is the use of these textured rolling pins available from Green Stuff World. This one's called the Ancestral Realm, packed full of detail, and I'll show you this shortly on a piece of tile. So first up, I experimented with Milliput and the textured roller. This had some ups and downs. So the downsides of this one was Milliput in itself is very sticky and it kept clogging up the roller every time I used it, which meant it needed heavy cleaning each time. As you can see, it's rock hard once set, but in its sort of pliable state as you're using it, even with Vaseline or something on the roller, and it just kept clogging and it wasn't giving the results I sort of was hoping it would give. The level of detail is quite nice though, and I think with a bit more experimenting it might work okay. So next up I mixed in some green stuff in with the Milliput, and it gives more of a sort of lime green sort of finish. You can see the two here compared. The problem with using green stuff is as it cures it softens, so you lose a lot of the sharp edges in the detail, which is not great for this sort of work because you want those crisp sort of sharp angles from the textured roller. However, mixing in the green stuff did also alter the properties of the Milliput and took away a lot of the stickiness. So next up I tried something completely new which I've not used before. It's from a company called Das. It's a air drying sort of plasticine modelling clay. You get this in sort of craft shops over in the UK. It's kind of an orangey red colour. As you can see here, the detail is a lot crisper. It also dries really hard once it's done. However, it's more brittle than the Milliput or green stuff, allowing it to actually be sort of broken away and used as sort of a better material to base with. There's a lot less effort required. As you can see here, it's still kind of flexible where it's still drying. It does take quite a long time to air dry. I mean, it's not actually that hot over in the UK at the moment, so maybe that's got something to do with it. But if you look at the ends there where I was just flicking, you can see it's quite hard. And then I've got all three pieces here, and you can just see the level of detail between them. So you can see the green stuff is softened out. The Milliput kind of didn't take the detail too well, just because it kept clogging the roller, and the Das clay has done exactly what I wanted it to do. So I prepared a piece of cork and glued it onto the base. Tore away some of the edges already just to give it more rough and sort of natural look, more sort of rock-like. As you can see on the top of the model there, I've green stuffed in all the little gaps on the shoulder. I've also left the model separate from the base. These little bits that I'm just pinging out here were kind of tight-fitting. But yeah, so the base is separate. I'm going to pop that on here now just to sort of offer it up so you can see roughly where it's going to go, and the sort of area around it I've got to work with to spruce up the base and make it a little bit more exciting than the ones on the GW website at the moment where they're just sand around it. So the plan is to have a underwater lost Atlantis city in the depths kind of feel to the entire army. I want to add in a lot of coral, sort of sea plant life, ruined ships, all sorts of little bits like that. So here you can see I've got the bag of anchors from Green Stuff World. There's plenty in here for decent sizes, some for little smaller bases, some for larger bases. These are actually pendants I believe, but I cut the little sort of hoop off the top and used it on the base. And then I've got the bag of rudders or ship's wheels. Some of these are quite ornate, probably a bit too big for this sort of scale model, but there are some really nice little ones in there as well which I'll feature on the basing. I want these bases to be super busy, loads of details on them, loads of colours. So first of all I've made loads of sheets of this orange Das clay into sort of tiled mosaic sheets. Then I've trimmed them all down, as you can see I'm doing here, into sort of little sections that I can work with that are about the same sort of size as the actual base of this model. And as you can see here, it's quite easy to cut as well in its state it's in at the moment. It's dry, but not 100% dry. I'd say a few more hours and this will be solid, but it is still really nice to cut here. And it's also sort of weak enough to break intentionally, but if you just sort of drop it on the desk, flick it about a bit, it doesn't actually have any sort of breakage. But you can sort of snap the tiles, which you'll see me doing shortly, to get the sort of nice sort of shapes you want for the base. I should probably be using a ruler to cut these as well, just to get some nice crisp edges. However, because it's sort of underwater, damaged, eroded away, I'm going to be breaking up some of this stuff anyway. I just went ahead and sort of cut them all freehand. They're straight enough, and I will be sort of, like I said, breaking them away a little bit more to make them look a bit more like they've been under the sea for potentially thousands of years. It's also important to save these bits that are being cut away as well. While they may look like they're useless because they don't have texture on them, they're the same height and thickness as the actual textured pieces, so when you're trying to fill in void areas to keep the base level, it's nice to have some scrap pieces to fill in sort of void areas to keep the base nice and level. So I'm going to gently start breaking up bits of the tile now, and then positioning them roughly on the base where I'm going to have them for when I put the actual plastic part of the model on top shortly. While they're still like this, they're quite easy to manipulate with either small breakages, bending them slightly so they hang over like the edge to look like the tiles are sort of being battered and old. And while doing this, you can sort of get a good feel for sort of how the base is going to go together in the end, because you can leave spaces where you know you're going to put sand, maybe where you're going to add in the extra little the fish that are actually in the kit itself. Here I start putting bits at angles, but then I decide to keep them sort of parallel, so the tiles look like they're sort of separated but still roughly in the sort of same position they would have been before they were sort of destroyed underwater. So while you're doing this, you can also trial and error a lot. You don't have to glue anything down. You can move these around until you get sort of how you envision the end base to look. So here you can see I've got the tile roughly where I want it. I can just like break the little corner piece off. Kind of did this slightly off to one side so you couldn't really see it, but here you can see me snapping it away. Still quite brittle in this state, and that allowed me to line it up with the base underneath so that there's not too much overhang. While having a really impressive, nice, big looking base is awesome, you kind of want to keep it sensible on the gaming table as well. So if stuff's quite sort of hanging over, have it high enough up so that it's not going to sort of block infantry that during the game may want to, actually be able to reach and touch the base. If you're purely doing it for a display piece, then go nuts, but a lot of my stuff will be used in games, so I always sort of build my bases around keeping in mind that if you have something cool sticking out of it, it might interfere with sort of easy gameplay. And here I've left a bit of a void in the middle of the base because I know that the plasticky bit that the model stands on is going to cover it up, so instead of wasting this cool little tile stuff I've just made, I put a scrap piece in the middle just to keep it all level, and these are the pieces that we saved earlier from the offcuts. So I positioned it roughly where I sort of think it's all going to look, then I put the actual base of the model on to the base we're creating, just so you can get a feel of what's hidden, what's visible. If you've got like a specific little piece of pattern you may want actually sort of more viewable, then you can alter it around. So I'm also putting the model on the base now just to make sure that there's no interference with the like the wave that comes off his cloak, because you don't want to go ahead, build yourself an awesome looking base, go to put the model on and find out that you've sort of blocked where some of it's going to go, requiring more sort of cutting and modifications potentially when you've already put paint on the model. So I wasn't quite happy there, as you can see, with the angle the model was facing, so I've adjusted it round a little bit. So I'm happy with the position of the model, so I'm going to go ahead and glue these pieces down. I'm using Yoo-hoo glue for this. I found that using like a straight super glue, it absorbs into the cork and into the tile a bit, and then you don't really get much bond between the two. This stuff is brilliant. It will literally glue anything to anything. It's my go-to for base building. It's also great for doing these sort of slime drool out of models' mouths because it dries pretty hard, so it won't fall off like during gaming or anything. But yeah, so I go ahead and glue all the pieces down one at a time so that I don't sort of lose my position of where I've already got the previous ones. I'm also leaving a little bit of space between some of the tiles because I want to put sand in between them, just to sort of show that the tiles have shifted over time and sort of sand is fallen in to make it look a bit more natural. I imagine that these tiles wouldn't all be nice and neat, still stacked, you know, perfectly spaced out. They would have shifted and had sort of debris and stuff fall in between them. Just going to go ahead and speed this up. I think you get where we're going with this now. So here you can see the scrap void piece in the middle, just to keep the top surface of the base a bit more level. What I will actually do though is put a bit of green stuff on the inside of the hollow bottom of the base, pad it out a little bit just to give the base a bit more surface to bond to. There is a decent amount around the edges, which I will glue down as well. It's just nice to have that sort of central point which anchors the model sort of flush into the base. So using a little bit of green stuff and some super glue, I've attached a little anchor to the base from our pendant set and cut off the little hoop where you put the sort of necklace bit through. I've done the same with the ship's wheel, except I buried one of the parts of the wheel under a bit of green stuff, which will have sand over it to make it look as if it's sort of been buried a little bit. So I'm just painting on fine surface polyfiller around the sort of connecting parts of the base, so where the base meets the tile, just to smooth out any edges, get rid of any gaps and make it sort of a more natural join when the sand is sort of applied. So I'll go over the plastic a little bit and over the tile a little bit just to sort of bridge it and make it look more seamless. I have seen people use this polyfiller just as like a texture to the base. However, when you apply it, if you use a brush, you'll get brush strokes in it. If you use a tool, you'll get the tool marks in it. So I find that putting something over it and just using this as a gap filler is better than use it as an actual texture. I mean, you could mix sand into it and make it more like a pre-mixed sort of textured paste. But I like doing it this way just because you have a lot more control over where you're putting the texture, and you can just wash it off with a little bit of water before it sets, which you may want to do if you get it in sort of the wrong place. I will show you this shortly because I apply some skulls to the base. I push them into this texture as it's drying. Once they've dried, I pull them away and then pop them back down with super glue just to make sure they're solid in there. Again, I'll speed this bit up now because you'll see where we're going with this. So you can see here I'm just popping in a few little skulls, just some random ones from the new the skull set, which is, yeah, it just adds more to the base. It gives you another colour. There would be skulls, I guess, down here if there were, you know, an old ruined city. Various different skulls to show that maybe a battle was fought here long ago. So you can see the base is really starting to come together now, and it's looking a lot nicer than just a flat base with sort of sand and maybe a few tufts on it. I will add a lot of foliage later though, so this isn't everything going on here. Shortly I added on a few little green stuff bits of like coral plant life. They were just little green stuff sausages I rolled, poked a little hole in the end and then positioned the little 3 of them, which we'll see shortly. Unfortunately I sprayed the base before I added that bit into the video, so you'll see them finished, but not as green stuff, which you'll be able to see them as in the little picture. So here I'm just putting the PVA down over the joining sort of texture between the base and the tile. I overlap it a little bit here and there, just again to keep sort of a seamless join, so it doesn't look like the plastic bits just stuck on the top of the tiles. You can see there I've just put some PVA on the back of the skull, and I'll go ahead and wipe that off in a sec. So using a clean brush with just water on, I go ahead and just clean the back of the skull off there. So I'm dropping the sand over the freshly PVA'd areas and making sure to sort of pinch different bits from the little sand tray I've got here. So I've got some really fine sand in there and some sort of more coarse sand. I give the tray a little shake just to sort of separate out the fine sand. I want to pinch that and apply it just sort of more in the cracks, so you've got like the nice dusty sand just sort of in the recesses. The skull was a little bit wet still, so there was sand stuck to it. I've gone ahead and just cleaned that off again with a bit of water, because I want that skull so that it's embedded in the sand, but so that you can still see the skull. So we got all the sand on the base now, and you can see that it kind of still looks like the plastic bit on the top is separate from the tiles, and they don't look that seamless. However, once it's sprayed, which you'll see very shortly, it comes together nicely. And here we have our sprayed, prepped, ready to go base. So I use Chaos Black out of the can just because I like how it applies, and I want it to get a really strong coverage over the whole model. I then apply white through the airbrush just for sort of natural pre-highlights, and you can see here the texture on the tiles is quite something else. It's really nice. I'm really happy with how this clay performed and held the shape. So in the next part I will show you how I go about painting the base and all the fish, the little turtle, the plant life, and then we're going to get some foliage on it using a new technique I've been experimenting with. I think it looks really nice, and it should lend itself to this sort of basing scheme. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I'm going to be doing lots of shorter part videos instead, because I can process them and get them out quicker, so you guys have something to sort of look at on a more frequent basis instead of releasing like one big 3-hour video at the end. I'll try and do lots of smaller 20 minutes, and then you can also sort of, you'll have them all pre-broken up ready, so you can find the bits you're interested in. If you have anything you want to go through, just comment and I'll do my best to answer. But yeah, again, thanks for your support.